talk to me about like the jealousy. Where do you see jealousy in the story?
Cain jealous over Abel because more power him over Cain.
Right. How do you know that? Because it doesn't specifically say that he was jealous, but how do we know that he was jealous?
Because when he got mad at it, and it was mad after the house jealousy.
Exactly. Now, that to me is something not obvious if you read it, but became obvious to me this week as I was memorizing it and just thinking about this and talking it out loud and listening to it. Isn't the way that Cain responds like exactly the way that people respond when they're jealous of somebody else or whenever they get confronted in their sin? Like, how would that typically happen? Like let's say like a high school boy or a high school girl or middle school boy, middle school girl. How would they typically handle if their brother and sister got something that they didn't get and they're really jealous? Especially if a parent came and said, "Hey, like, why are you mad about this?" Yeah, you just kind of build, right? But that shows the heart behind it, right? It shows the jealous heart behind it. That's hard sometimes for me to grasp that and to deal with that because I feel like it almost wasn't fair. Do y'all feel like that? Because God didn't really tell them what to do, right? So it almost feels unfair. But then if I think about Cain's response, what would have been, if Cain's heart was in the right place, what would have been the right response when God said those things to him? Like, okay, what did God say? Actually, let me ask it differently. What did God say to him? What were the four things the questions that God asked?
He said, why are you so angry?
Yeah, why are you angry?
Why are your face downcast?
Okay, what does that mean? What does it mean with your face
frown?
Down? Okay, like the frown. Yeah, like you know what that look is, right? Whenever somebody's ticked off, like that's really what that's talking about there. Sometimes you can just look at somebody's face and tell that like they are just ticked off. That's what that's talking about. Okay, so God says, why are you angry? Why are your face downcast? What else does he say?
If you do the right thing, were you not accepted?
Yeah, will you not be accepted? But if you don't do the right thing, and then talk to me about, what does it say?
Sin is crouching at your door. It will come and
it wants you.
It desires to have you.
Yeah, it desires to have you.
And must master it.
Yeah, you
Good.
must master it.
Excellent. Okay, so if Cain's heart, if he wasn't jealous, and his heart was in the right place, how would he have responded to that?
Ask for forgiveness and do better.
Okay, had he done something wrong at this point?
For being
Well, he had
angry.
anger in his heart.
Okay.
So.
It is possible to be angry and not sin. That's difficult. Because God says that, in your anger, don't sin. He says that. There's a very fine line where we allow anger to take hold of us. Like what sin's talking about here. When anger takes hold of us and it drives us to say something harsh or to do something harsh or angry, that's different. But if we're just feeling that desire of anger, then we have the opportunity to do the right thing in that situation. To submit ourselves to God, to resist the devil, and to choose the right thing through the power of Christ. That's not ourselves, but through the power of Christ, and to be self-controlled in that way. I think if Cain, had done the right thing there, if his heart had been in the right place, if he wasn't jealous, then he would have just done the right thing. That's what God said, right? Like, if you do the right thing, will you not be accepted? So Cain would have went back and realized, I need to give the best of my crops. I need to go back and not just give God some, that's what it says, some of the fruit of the soil. I need to give him the best, the first fruits, the best stuff, not just the leftovers. And if Cain's heart had been in the right place, if he wasn't jealous, but if he was truly giving it because he wanted to give a sacrifice to God, he would have gone back and just done the right thing. And God said, you'll be accepted. But his heart, his response to that shows us that he really did have a jealous heart. And that was his sin. Okay, what else do y'all see in this story? What other themes are there? What's the point of the story for us? What should we take away from it? Okay, good. Talk to me about this will be the last thing we talk about. Talk to me about the progression of sin. Like that sin is scratching at your door, it desires to have you, but you must master it. Talk to me about how does sin itself actually work? How do we get to the place where we actually stumble into sin and do the wrong thing? Because there's actually a build-up to that, right? So what's the build-up? Okay, good. How about even in the story first? Let's talk about what's the build-up for Cain. Okay.
That God had favor over Abel and his offering.
Okay, good. And then he gets mad, right? So that was kind of actually even before he got mad. And then what happened to his anger?
It bubbled over and led him to kill.
Yeah,
Abel.
led him first to attack his brother, and then ultimately to kill his brother, right? And then even to go further and to lie about it and to try and cover it up. So it's just this downward progression, this downward spiral of terrible sin. James talks about sin. Does anyone know what James says about sin and temptation?
No, the wages of sin is death.
That's Romans 3. That's a very good verse there. James talks about it, and he writes it in his first chapter, so maybe that'd be a cool thing to go read tonight or this afternoon, maybe, after talking about this. But this is kind of the steps of sin that James talks about. First, it starts with desire. And I think in this story here, Cain's desire was jealousy, right? He wanted what Abel had. That's where it started, a desire. And when desire grows, desire gives birth to sin. And that sin was anger, right? Which grew even more. And when sin gives birth, it gives birth to death. That's the kind of three-step process. Desire gives birth to sin, and sin gives birth to death. And we see that so clearly in this story. And I think if we look at our own lives, we can see that in our own lives. It's our desires, really, that ultimately lead us to sin. So I think about it this way. Like, if we're struggling with physical, sexual temptation, there's a desire in each one of us to be sexually satisfied, right? Like, we can be honest and real about that. God made us that way, to be sexually satisfied. And that is designed primarily to be, only really, not even primarily, but it is designed to be fulfilled in marriage. So that desire, though, if we feed that desire, it can grow, especially right now. Song of Solomon talks about don't awaken love before it's time. If we feed that desire right now, that desire can grow and it can give birth to sin. And if we continue to feed that sin, it can give birth to death, which can lead us to places like where Cain wound up, just much, much further than we want to go, much, much further than, and cost us much, much more than we want to pay. Maybe there's other areas of our lives too, like if we have a desire to, maybe we have like a difficult life. I know a lot of people use drugs or alcohol because they have really hard things going on in their life. And they know like this doesn't solve any of those problems, but it does like for a time, it makes those things go away. So they have that deep desire just to feel peace or to have hope. And that desire, if they feed that and say, look, that's the most important thing, is that I am satisfied, or that I'm able to pull back from these problems or whatever. They feed that desire, that grows and gives birth to sin. They get drunk, or they get really high, or whatever. And then that can lead to things that are terrible, and that sin can give birth to death. Maybe even that's a physical death. In this story, it was a physical death. I think that's primarily talking about like a spiritual death, like a decay and that kind of thing. But I think that's a really good application for us to take from this passage. Does anybody have anything else that they want to bring in from the story? You guys did a great job this morning. Cool. Thank you all so much for paying attention. Is that fun?